If, and I do mean if, the Ohio State offseason hasn't been going according to plan, nobody told the odds makers. Welcome to the beat. It is Freaky Friday. That's Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Warden. We are presented by the Waterworks. We cover Ohio State and Birm. According to BetMGM, the Buckeyes are still good. In fact, they are the betting favorites to win the national championship next year.
Huh.
Can you imagine?
I mean, it's pretty simple to me. You think Ohio State is one of the most talented teams in the country. You think Ohio State can win every game they play. And if they don't even have to win every game they play anymore to win a national championship. So if you figure that they are the most talented roster in the country or one of the most talented, they're going to be battle tested. You're going to, as long as you get to the playoffs, sure. I think everyone has similar odds to make it from the top three in the Big Ten. Probably, I bet it's close, right? Ohio State, Oregon, Indiana, probably all got to be pretty close to the same. Or have the Vegas odds makers not learned from Indiana yet?
Well, they have kept Indiana higher than I think a lot of the way too early pollsters are putting the Hoosiers. Ohio State is number one. They are at plus 600. Notre Dame is number two at plus 700. I think largely because they don't play anyone during the regular season. So they have a clear path back to the college football playoff. I assume that they will be there. But Oregon is tied with them at 700. Texas also. All three of those, Notre Dame, Oregon, and Texas, all tied at plus 700. And right behind them is Indiana, which checks in ahead of Georgia, LSU, Alabama, and Texas A&M from the SEC. What a world we're living in, where those four programs are looking up at Indiana. And, well, everyone else in the Big Ten is too, because the Hoosiers are the national champions and the Big Ten champions. Yeah,
but what you get out of that is that Vegas expects Ohio State to beat three of the top five odds teams to win the national championship, right? I mean, and three of them, Indiana, Oregon, and Texas, are all on the Buckeye schedule by the first week of November. So you're going to find out real early. It's what we talked about on Snap Judgments when the schedule was released. Like, you may have a pretty good sense of not only if Ohio State's going to make the playoff by the end of October, but are they a real national championship contender or not? And I think that people believe in the talent, they believe in the coaching, they believe in the culture and the long-term recession-proof nature of the Ohio State program. But I don't know. I wrote about the schedule on Thursday for LettermanRow.com, and like, you're gonna get tested. That schedule is not going to be a joke for Ohio State, and I hope that people go into this season not seeing the preseason number one ranking, not seeing the top team to win the national championship according to the odds makers, and realize instead that you're losing 8 starters, you're losing 4 first-round picks on defense. You are going into 2026 with a lot of questions, and I think it's fair to. I'm always fascinated by the way locally we view the Ohio State program versus the way it's viewed nationally.
That's exactly what I was going to say, because you just said there are a lot of questions, and we talk about them every day on the beat. But that's the standard that Ohio State is held to locally. And then nationally, everyone's like, you know what? What's wrong with those Ohio State beat guys? And that podcast that's so critical and nitpicking all the time, that Austin Birm Show, like, don't they know how good the Buckeyes have it? Yeah, we do know that. But it also is like the nature of playing at Ohio State, where you have the highest expectations imaginable. We're always going to look at things that can be improved. But it is, I think, a welcome reminder from time to time when you zoom out and it's like, I wouldn't want to bet against the Buckeyes, because that doesn't sound like a good idea.
No, and at plus 600, I mean, it might be worth it right now just to throw a couple bills on them and let it ride.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll see. You don't have to take our gambling advice.
Yeah, I wouldn't actually.
You definitely shouldn't take Birm's gambling advice ever. But you can get his insight by reaching out to us. It is, as I mentioned, a Freaky Friday. That means we've got a foursome of questions from the mailbag. There were more. I wish we'll get back to like more than 4 at some point throughout this offseason, because we get a lot of them and we pare them down to try and make this a manageable episode as we get through this offseason, and also spread them out. But we'll get into all of those that we picked today, which is 4 plus a bonus, which I know Birm is incredibly excited for. Thank you to all of you who've also been sending emails to the Austin Birm Show at gmail.com asking for us to talk about wrestling more, because that's what Birm is most passionate about in the world.
And I think it's important to say, if you want to ask us about wrestling, just label that one directly for Austin. because I don't know.
Yes, you do. Don't lie.
I don't.
All right.
When was the last time I had to be at your house on a Monday night? It's been a while, so I don't watch. The only time I ever watch wrestling is if I'm in your living room.
Whatever, man. It's the road to WrestleMania, and Royal Rumble's on Saturday, so I know you'll be watching because this is the best time of year to be doing that. That doesn't have anything to do with Ohio State football, which Kellen has some more leadership, I think, on the mind. We talked about it, I believe, a little on Wednesday, and some with Julian Sayin in that conversation in the quarterback review preview. But anyway, he writes in about having that relentless dog mentality and playing with an attitude, high energy. It's a common denominator amongst the national championship winning teams, specifically on both lines of scrimmage. Who's a player or players on the 2026 roster that we could see fitting this mold for Ohio State and be the leader of the pack for this mentality. He said it felt like the national champions in 2024. That was Will Howard was driving that. So there were a lot of them. I think that was why that team won the national championship, is that you had like a dozen dogs leading the way. But where would you begin with the leadership component for this version of the Buckeyes?
I'm going to begin with what I hope it is and not necessarily what I think it is. We saw a different personality beginning to emerge with Jeremiah Smith last year. And I think that you have to hope for the evolution of that. He's been very confident as usual when doing media things in the last few weeks, talking about what he's expecting for his junior season, his final season of college football.
What?
I think at times, yeah, believe it or not, I don't think he'll stay for a fourth year. There are times last year, however, when I felt like Jeremiah's emotions skewed a touch negative, as opposed to leaning into the fact that I'm the best player, I'm going to bring other people along. I think sometimes, we forget that these are 20-year-old people who are dealing with a ton of pressure, and then they play positions like wide receiver, which are obviously known as being, divas, give me the damn ball types. The best teams occur when the best players are the best leaders. Like that's a cliche. It's old as time, but it's true. I think Jeremiah Smith, if this team is going to go where it needs to go, Jeremiah Smith needs to be the guy that puts them on their back and becomes the vocal, emotional leader of this team. There's guys like Brandon Ennis who we know all about. That's not a surprise. Jermaine Matthews on the defensive side of the ball is another one. But for me, for this team to really get where it has to go, there's two guys, and it's Kenyatta Jackson to continue the rise he was on from a year ago, and it's Jeremiah Smith.
Yeah, I wonder how, as you mentioned, it felt like the emotions were all over the map at times for Jeremiah. And early in the year, it was the frustration, which he talked about the drops, the plays that he didn't make, and he was really hard on himself, and it wasn't channeling that at anybody else, even if he would often come to the sideline and just look like maybe no one should be anywhere near him or want to talk to him. He said that was more internal than external, like not wanting more targets, not begging for the football more, any of that diva stuff that you might have mentioned with the cliched wide receiver mentality. But also with the injury and the setback, some of those things had like never happened to him before, health-wise or frustration-wise, to be in games where you either couldn't play at all or you're being limited schematically by what the opponent could do. And so he's got to take that into year 3 and grow and stay more level-headed because everyone is looking to him always. That was happening a year ago. He is so good. He's always going to set the tone, whether there were older players around him or not. But that's doubly true when you are heading into your 3rd year in the program and you're as good as he is. So he's got to set the tone. He did that last year anyway. I mean, when you talk about dudes of the week or getting, Iron Buckeye awards, like that stuff already happens because of his work ethic, but that's a given. You know what kind of approach you're going to get day in and day out from him. But what you're talking about in terms of locker room communication, on the field communication, sideline mentality, all that stuff, I do think that that's probably like the one area you could look at for Jeremiah and say you could get 5 or 10% better at that. And what would that look like? I mean, it'd be terrifying. That's my spitball there.
I wonder if the injury, something he'd never experienced and dealt with as in his time as a football player, I wonder if that will provide any sense of like removing the notion that you could take your opportunity for granted, and it gives you a little different insight / perspective on the opportunity that you have in front of you, and go from there. Again, I mean, the question here from Kellen is about energy and attitude and the dog mentality, which certainly we know Jeremiah has that. But leadership and then bringing other guys with you is different than just having that. So you can have that and still be somewhat reclusive and still be a guy that when things get tough, like internalizes things or steps away from your team. Like there's a way to do both of those things, and I think that's where Jeremiah has to take that leap. I would also expect that we will see more out of Philip Daniels in that way. I think that if you go back to the 2024 season, the national championship run, you had Seth McLaughlin throughout the early part of the season being the emotional leader on the offensive line. When he got hurt, Donovan Jackson had to step up. Having one of those guys, the value of having 4 returning starters on the offensive line is obvious from a play perspective. But when it comes down to leadership and emotion, I think those guys have to set the tone. And with the new offensive coordinator and Arthur Smith's philosophy and more of a run-heavy guy, I think you're going to see the offensive line be tasked with being a little bit more physical and a little bit more in your face this year. And I think Philip Daniels is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, when you look at the entirety of that offensive line with the 4 starters back, one of them's a captain in Austin Serveld, and feels like Carson Hinsman has now been in college for a decade. Luke Montgomery has a full year plus of starting experience. We know that those guys are never going to get shortchanged when it comes to work, and they're not. I think Austin Serveld is increasingly finding his voice, but the point is not to talk about those guys that are already established, because on the offensive side, it's veterans and starters all over the place. It's who does that to help with Jermaine Matthews and Kenyatta Jackson on the defensive side, because whether we want to argue about if Caden Curry was the true heart and soul of the defense, or Sonny Styles or Caleb Downs, like all 3 of them are gone. It doesn't matter. Whatever pecking order you want to assign to them, that's blood, guts, leadership, and production that all has to be replaced. So, Peyton Pierce, you're on deck for that at linebacker. You've got to set the tone for that group. Jalen McClain, you are the guy at safety, whatever position you're going to play with those guys. There's new faces that are going to be next to you, and Terry Moore and Earl Little. And, some of that's true for Jermaine at corner as well, with Devin Sanchez taking that next step forward. But, who else can do that on the defensive line with Caden McDonald also no longer there, that you just knew play in and play out what you were going to get from him. So offense, I don't have any concern about leadership or dog mentality or aggression or work ethic or any of that stuff. And I don't have actual doubts about people doing that on the defensive side of the football, but who's it actually going to be? It's not as easy to forecast that as it has been in years past.
Well, yeah, because last year's group, the guys you just mentioned, Caden McDonald, first team All-American, going to be a first round pick. Sonny Styles, going to be a first round pick. Caleb Downs, going to be a first round pick. Caden Curry led the team in sacks. Those were guys who had not just a personality and attitude, but they had productivity and results that backed up what they were saying. And it gave people a sense of, hey, these are the leaders. So when you're replacing 8 starters and you're trying to figure out how a bunch of new players get inserted into the lineup and fit, it's going to be incumbent on one of those guys, the new guys, I think, guys that have played football elsewhere, to come in and say, hey, like Will Howard did, to Kellen's point. Will Howard did not come into Ohio State as this all-American player with huge expectations on his shoulders. He came in as a guy who was desperate to win real football games that really mattered. And so he came in and immediately took on that role. Now, can a guy like Terry Moore do that? Can a guy like Earl Little do that? A guy like Earl Little, who went to Alabama and played at Florida State, and like he's been in programs that he felt like he probably should have a better career at and win more games at, and he hasn't done it. So is there one of those guys that's going to step into the lineup and immediately become an emotional heart and soul type leader? And I think that is very important for Ohio State this year, but who it is going to depend on how these next 4 weeks goes.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Thanks to Kellen for that question and that comment. This came from Rita. She said she's been listening for a long time, decided to send in a little note to us on the Austin Birm Show at gmail.com. And it was an interesting, thought experiment. Did the Buckeyes win a championship because of Ryan Day or in spite of him? He does seem to get conservative at times and coach too tight. people kept saying he was playing chess. She was talking about last season, while others were playing checkers with all the talent at his disposal. Why not play some freaking checkers and have fun? It sounds like a blast to me. The games last year were boring except for the win in Ann Arbor. The final 2 games, the team looked unprepared. I don't think that I would say
unpack.
It's a lot. Yeah. I mean, it's a fair question. I don't have any issue with asking it. I personally believe that they want it because of him. We saw this. There's still conversation about the schedule and how Ohio State's going to struggle, and Ryan Day hasn't learned his lesson. I do agree that they played too slow, and that the saving the reps for the postseason approach last year did not pan out. Because if you're going to save all that effort, you're going to need to actually play more than one game in the postseason or in the college football playoff, and so that was a fruitless endeavor. I don't say that Ohio State won in spite of Ryan Day the year before, because that team cut it loose, and I don't know how many coaches would have been able to bounce back and lead that group and have the credibility when we think about the meeting in the Woody after the loss to Michigan, to pull them back together and then to go on the run that they went on. That cannot be solely player led. It had, like, if they didn't believe in their coach, then everyone would have immediately checked out and that season would have been over. So some of this isn't even about Ryan Day and X's and O's, and some of it is more tied to his ability to communicate and build a brotherhood, which I know people are tired of hearing that buzzword about the Buckeyes right now, but it's true, and that's what prompted them to go on that run. That comes from the top down. So I think we can argue about the schematic approach, but and there's another part of this where Rita said she is thankful that Ryan Day is the leader of Ohio State. This wasn't like she wasn't trying to force him out, didn't want him fired, wasn't upset about the end of last year. She recognized the positives, and that just didn't fit on the screen here. So I want to make that point as well. But like the schematic versus the motivational point with Ryan Day, to me, is not even like, it's not the same conversation.
No, and I think if you went down the roster for the 2024 national champs and asked them, like, what was the motivation to get off the mat after the Michigan game at the end of November that year, 95% of them will say they wanted to win for Ryan Day. So I don't think that you can dismiss his influence or say the Buckeyes won in spite of him when so many people were getting up to fight for him. Like, I just don't think that's possible. I don't think that, as you mentioned, if that team didn't believe in him, they would not have bounced back the way they did against Tennessee and against Oregon and Texas and Notre Dame. They would have quit, like a lot of people expected the Buckeyes to. And if that was the case, I think that there is a much different conversation about Ryan Day right now, because I don't think he would be Ohio State's head coach right now. And I don't think he would be positioned to lead Ohio State into the next half dozen years with the Buckeyes being right at the top of the sport again and again and again. Is he perfect as a head coach? Of course not. He's it. And I know people, they scoff when you mention the brotherhood at times, and they scoff when I mention the fact this is still his first head coaching job. And I understand he's now 7 years into it, and he's certainly learned a lot. He has changed the way Ohio State handles its coaching staff. He's changed a lot of it, but he's certainly not flawless as a coach. And I think to dismiss the fact that there was a lot of weird things happening heading into the Indiana game would be a disservice to the truth. And I think that Ohio State, from a game plan perspective, still felt they were prepared for Miami and felt like they had a plan that was going to work against Miami. They did not execute it. And I think anybody who goes back and rewatches that game will see that. It was not poor play calling. It was not a lack of aggression from Ryan Day. It was not the Buckeyes playing slow. Yeah, there were those 2 drives in the third quarter where you're like, what is going on here? But that speaks to the bigger deficiency of the roster as a whole in 2025 and the way the Buckeyes tried to mitigate it and play around it by moving a little slower because they didn't have the explosive players that they felt they had in 2024. Now, all those things are talking points. They're all things that people are going to say, well, yeah, but you didn't play fast against Grambling. You didn't do that like when you could have done whatever you wanted. I don't think any of that stuff matters. Ryan Day, the quote of the year was that kicking ass is fun, right? So it was fun. It was a really fun season, I thought. Boring? No, not in my opinion. It was fun because Ohio State was as dominant for the first 12 games as we've ever seen Ohio State be, maybe in my lifetime. Certainly arguably with the 2019 team, the 1996, 98 teams. Like, that was as dominant and fun to watch as like good football, like solid, complimentary, well-coached, executed football for 12 games as maybe ever in Ohio State history. That said, you certainly leave the season with your feelings like, was I lied to? Did I get misled? Did I just imagine what I saw the first 12 games? Because the last two were funky. And that's what happens when you run into good teams. So now Ryan Day has to go back to the drawing board and start over with a new team this year. And I don't think they won in spite of him. I think they won for him. I think they won because he refused to quit when a lot of people in his shoes may have. And I think that will pay off in the long run for Ohio State. But I do understand the sentiment of the question, because I know as an X's and O's game day coach between the white lines, there are difficulties at times with clock management. There are difficulties with game management. But I know people just accuse me of being a homer, but I try to give a little grace in a situation that I don't personally understand entirely. Like, I don't know what it would take to do that flawlessly, but I know that after 7 years on the job, he's a much better coach than he was 3 years ago. And I think he'll be a much better coach 3 years from now. So I would expect the Buckeyes to win another national championship or two in his tenure. Probably not going to happen this year. I'm just going to put that out there. I don't think it'll happen this year.
Wow.
Go back to this first part of the show. The schedules, I just don't think you get through it as cleanly as you'd like. But I appreciate the question, Rita. I really do. I don't think the games were boring. Do you think the games are boring?
I think people on the outside would have liked to have seen more sustained aggression. I don't disagree with that notion. I understand what Ohio State was trying to accomplish, and then the idea that the games and the offense were boring was that they were so methodical and they were limiting possessions, all the things that we've talked about. Like, that's not an exciting brand of football. So right. I think I understand where people are coming from on that, like, without question. And I don't really expect it to change that much, to be honest with you, especially because of the difficulty of that schedule. So, and paring down the roster size and not potentially playing as much depth, like, that's gonna be the way the Buckeyes play moving forward. And it's interesting because you had a decade of methodical defense and special teams led football from Jim Tressel, and like, I don't remember people ever accusing Ohio State, because from my vantage point at that point, it was more national. It wasn't like people looked at Ohio State as a boring football program. And then Urban came in here and like injected adrenaline directly into the offense, and was like, he was gonna score as many points as possible in whatever way it took to get to that point. And it's like, now we're shifting back to a little bit more of Ryan Day protecting a talent advantage and taking a longer term view instead of treating it like 4th and inches against Grambling. Just for example that you used, like, I don't think what he's doing is wrong, but I also don't think it's exciting. And I get that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't, it's not exciting, but if you go into the 2026 season and you win 11 or 12 regular season games and you win them all by 1 point and you win them all 10-9, like, that was always the argument in the Tressel era. If you go back to the 2002 season, which, is in lore for Ohio State and should be forever because of the way that season went. But like, it was as frustrating and tedious a season to watch as any season in the history of college football. And they won a national championship in the most improbable way. But then, and we've talked about this before, if you go to the 2014 team, it's not like that season was like all rainbows and butterflies. Like, there were a lot of like, what is going on here type of moments in that season, including a loss in week 2 at home to Virginia Tech that had people ready to throw the entire program in the dumpster after losing to Michigan State and Clemson to finish out the 2013 season. So like, there's an interesting parallel heading into this season, I guess, if you look at that year, because that week 2 game against Virginia Tech, you're like, I don't understand what's going on. And this year you go to Texas and who knows what's going to happen. But, the Buckeyes' goal is to just get better and get better and get better, because they have to figure out who they are as a team by the time they head to Bloomington in October next year. And I think that those first 6 games might feel a little bit like disjointed and like confusing to people, but as long as you win them, that's all that matters.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know that you have to wait until Bloomington when you have Illinois and Iowa before that. So that's not going to be a walk in the park either.
You know what's been a walk in the park?
Hold on. I had mine teed up.
Oh, man.
I know. I was thinking about getting back outside, but right now we just have to make sure that our homes are winter ready with the Waterworks and Hetter Energy Savings Plan. Get priority heating service, members only savings, and continuous comfort all year long. Call today to schedule. It's the Waterworks and Hetter, 614-232-2222. Oh, what were you going to say, Birm?
I was saying, when you talk about comfort, when you mention the word comfort, I have found in the last, I don't know, couple months now, 7 weeks, that there's a lot more comfort, not for me, not because I've lost over 30 plus pounds on Awaken 180 in the last 7 weeks, but because my wife is a lot happier, because she's sleeping a lot better, because I'm snoring a lot less. There's little things. There's so many good reasons to lose weight and to take advantage of opportunities to increase your overall awareness of your health. But it also impacts other people because, as I said, my wife is sleeping a lot better. I'm snoring a lot less. I'm sleeping a lot better. I'm eating a lot better. I feel a lot better. My joints feel great. I am getting ready to go into maintenance mode. Feel great about that. It's been a really fun experience so far on the Awaken 180 weight loss plan. And I think if you go to awaken180weightloss.com, you'll see why it works. And you can see that it works with me and with Austin and guys like Brandon Beam over at 97.1 The Fan. So the numbers, like I'm under 200 pounds for the first time in 25 years, which feels insane to say. But it's true. It's accurate. It's easy. And it's easy to stay on the plan and keep going. So to everyone who's been a part of this journey, thank you. Go to awaken180weightloss.com and you can start your own journey there.
All right. So we are halfway through the 4-pack of questions. Bailey has this, and it's a 2-parter. The parts are not related to each other, at least to the best of my knowledge. Is there a world where Ohio State will move Austin Serveld to the right side of the line? He said maybe right tackle, but it was open to either guard or tackle when he wrote the question because of Ian Moore sliding in at left tackle. And then he wants to know our favorite Ohio brewery. I think that there is a, let's say, 55% chance that Austin Serveld plays right tackle next year.
I don't know how to put a percentage on it. I think from a personnel standpoint, from a conversation about one single player standpoint, heading into year 2 of Austin Serveld being like identified as the key cog in the offensive line, and this started actually in the playoff at the end of the 2024 season, but now we're heading into year 3 of Austin Serveld being like the most valuable piece of the offensive line. And each year the conversation would be like, yeah, but can he play this position this time? It was like, okay, so he's the right guard. Is he the left guard? Is he the right tackle? Is he the left tackle? Now he's the left tackle. And now he maybe needs to move to right tackle. Maybe he needs to move to right guard. I think for the overall betterment of the Ohio State offensive line, I think that is what should happen. I do think that Austin Serveld will move off of left tackle and give Ian Moore the opportunity to cement his role with the team this spring. If what occurs last spring and last summer goes on again, and you know, when we expected Ethan Anianwa to rise up and he didn't, and Austin Serveld has to just be the guy because he's the most consistent, most reliable player on the offensive line, and that's what you want for your left tackle, your blindside guy, fine, I get it. But I would imagine that heading into this spring and heading into winter workouts, that the goal has to be to figure out how to get Ian Moore to be your starting left tackle, because it makes the entire rest of the offensive line better. Because even with the rise of Josh Padilla towards the end of the year, even with the opportunity Gabe Van Sickle had and the likelihood that he'll continue to get better, the full 5 starting offensive line is best if Ian Moore is at left tackle and Austin Serveld is at right guard or right tackle and Philip Daniels is at the other.
I think, and I'm not Tyler Bowen or Ryan Day, quite obviously. I'm not really of the mindset from the outside looking in that Austin Serveld should play guard for Ohio State. And I know that the conversation is that's probably what he would be as an NFL player. but he's not in the NFL yet. And you can, it makes me think back to the conversation about Donovan Jackson and if he should have spent more time at tackle in his career before the last half of his senior season. You can be a pro guard and a very high level college tackle. And that's what Austin Siereveld was for, almost all of last year, certainly every game in the regular season. And, he got hurt in the second half of the Cotton Bowl. We know that. Nobody up front played great against Indiana or Miami. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. I don't need to sugarcoat any of that. But Austin Siereveld did not, scrap any of the other work that preceded those two games. And it was really good. And he's going to have an opportunity to build on that even more. And I think that Phillip Daniels is probably better suited, especially because when we talked to Birm late in the season about his, lower body and leg injuries, he said like that's just a constant thing for him.
Yeah.
And if you maybe have to do a little bit less of that, and I'm not saying one position's easier than the other, but like trying to take on speed rushers on the edge, if you are a little bit limited or you have lingering, knee pain, maybe that'll all be gone next year. I don't know, but maybe it would be better suited for him physically to play a guard than tackle. And we know that Austin Siereveld can play tackle. So that's where I'm at going into spring ball, but by no means is that a guarantee.
It's kind of the catch-22 of being a football coach or a coach at any position. You have your obligation to your team. And obviously the better your team is, the more you win, the more secure you are in your job, the more opportunity you have to advance and grow. But on the same side or the other side of that token is that you have an obligation to your players to get them best developed for their next level. And so, this is a conversation Ohio State fans have probably been considering for decades. When you think back to like Terrell Pryor, like everyone knew coming into his time at Ohio State, he'd be a really hard player for other teams to compete against if he was at quarterback, but no one ever really thought, well, Terrell's going to be a quarterback in the NFL. So we need to make sure, like everyone kind of always knew that's where, if he was going to make an impact in the NFL, it would be at wide receiver, but it didn't make sense for Ohio State to play him at wide receiver. So yeah, I mean, it's likely Austin Sierveld's a guard at the next level. It's likely Donovan Jackson was a guard at the next level. Everyone knew that from the start too, but if he didn't play tackle last season for 2 seasons ago for Ohio State at the end of the year, Buckeyes don't win the national championship. So however you have to figure it out, the nice thing is that you have, because of the way this season that just finished went by, you have some depth that's experienced now that you didn't really have going into last year. So if you need to give a guy a break, and again, when you look at, I keep belaboring the point, when you look at this year's schedule, there's not a lot of opportunities to say, well, this is a load management day for Ohio State, because the schedule doesn't really set up that way. So whatever you can do to put Austin Siereveld and Phillip Daniels in the best position to be on the field as much as possible, then you have to do it. And how you protect them heading into the season and to the spring and winter, I think is the bigger question. But ultimately, the best version of this offensive line, we don't get to decide. But I personally, from what I saw last year, when Ian Moore was at tackle, I thought it looked different. And that's just, again, some of that's because it was against Purdue in the game he started when Phillip was out. Some of it was because Miami kind of went into a little bit of a soft zone with a lead at the start of the second half, and they didn't press the pressure button as much until the fourth quarter, and then they got to Julian saying when they wanted to again. So I think that there's growth to happen, but I think for the best overall picture on the line, I would move Austin Siereveld somewhere to the right side.
What if you were looking for the best beer in the state of Ohio?
I just go where you take me. So I don't really know. I know that I've always liked Jackie O's beer. That one seems to stand out to me when it comes to Ohio beers. Obviously, we've spent a lot of time at Land Grant, Wolf's Ridge. Those are good. You're certainly more versed in the locations. I just drink the beer wherever it finds me. I don't generally seek it. I don't generally hit the road looking for the best brewery experience.
I certainly do, as people are well aware, with road beers over the course of time. And we're blessed in the great state of Ohio with, 50 of the best breweries in America. I said it. It's elite. So I'd have to break it down almost by major city. I think if I'm in Cleveland, I want to go to the original Fatheads. I'm in Cincinnati, I would like to go to Mad Tree. When I am in the home base in Columbus, I think Columbus Brewing Company, the new location, the East Market, has been phenomenal. I like the combination of the pizza and the beer out there. I've always thought they made good beer, but the quality seems to have actually been ramped up by the competitive level in Columbus right now. And I've been doing a lot at Getaway in Bridge, the downtown Dublin area. Them and Seventh Son, obviously sister locations, very high level stuff there. So I can't narrow it down further. It's like trying to pick your favorite child, and that's actually easier for me to do because I only have one. Bob wrote in. He said he had just celebrated his 70th birthday. So happy birthday to you, Bob. And this is right up your alley, Birm. Everyone is excited for Chris Henry Jr.'s arrival. However, Jaquaden Guilford is rarely, maybe never talked about. He's all over the place from a player rating. Rivals, I think, actually has him rated ahead of Chris Henry. Ratings are ratings, but what does he bring to the Buckeyes in 2026, and what is your feeling about him?
The thing about Jaquaden Guilford, I think, is interesting is that for people who were looking at the Ohio State recruiting class last June, the Buckeyes had 4 receivers committed with Chris Henry, Caden Dixon-Wyatt, Brock Boyd, and Jaden Ricketts. And it was end of June. Jaquaden Guilford took his official visit. Middle of July, getting ready to make a decision. Everyone expected it to be Ohio State. Most people at that time had Jaquaden as a low 4-star type prospect, high 3-star. And many, many people in the Ohio State fan base were like, why do you need another receiver? Why would you take a 5th wide receiver in this class? He's just another receiver. He's a developmental guy. He's a Midwest guy. He doesn't do anything special. Ohio State believed at that time that they saw this might sound crazy to people considering we're talking about a guy who's likely a top 10 pick in the NFL draft in April or May, but they thought they saw a more twitched up athletic version of Carnell Tate. And so when you are heading into that commitment in July and everyone in Columbus is like, hey, we got our guy. And then all of a sudden, Ole Miss starts creeping up and there's all this conversation about Ole Miss. There was a day when it seemed like Jaquaden was going to end up choosing Ole Miss because that seemed to be the preference of some people in his immediate circle because of Ohio State's offensive quagmire at wide receiver at the time. Buckeyes fought tooth and nail to make sure that they held on to him. They got him to commit 3 weeks later, 3 weeks after his original commitment date. He has been as perfect as a commitment as you could have wanted for 5 months. Was at every home game, constantly on campus. No worries, no concerns. And then Brian Hartline left, and the Buckeyes had to fight tooth and nail again, this time with Lane Kiffin again, while he was now the head coach at LSU, to make sure that Jaquaden did not end up in Baton Rouge. And in doing so, had to pay him a lot more money, had to make sure that he understood where they saw him, which was, you are a guy we think is a Carnell Tate level wide receiver. So the Buckeyes fought, held on to both him and Chris Henry, as Bob alludes to here. And so if you wonder, how do the Buckeyes feel about him? That's all you need to know. They had to fight tooth and nail twice to make sure that he stayed in the class. They've been rewarded for their patience and their belief in him. Now that you see him, as Bob mentioned, on Rivals now has him as the number 17 overall player in the country, the number 2 ranked receiver in the country, 1 spot ahead of Chris Henry on that receiver list. I'm sorry, 2 spots ahead of Chris Henry. But all the conversation about which guy could come in and play this year, Chris Henry might be wide receiver 2, et cetera. No one's talking about Jaquaden Guilford. And all I would say to that is don't do that, because he doesn't have a lot of the year's worth of national hype that make you feel like, hey, we have to talk about him. But if he comes in with the right attitude physically, you're talking about a kid who's 6'2", 205 pounds, can run, can jump out of the gym, does everything right. As long as he can come in and pick up the playbook and figure out how to acclimate himself to the workout part of Ohio State football, he's going to be a player, and he's going to be a player early. I don't know if it'll be this year, but this is a different type of receiver than people are going to ever give him credit for being.
I will never try and top Birm when it comes to recruiting classes and analysis, so I will just leave it at that and move on to the bonus question that we got from Seth. It was straight to the point. Who's winning the Royal Rumble this weekend? What a great question. I cannot wait. I love the Rumble more than any other WWE event. I've been to a WrestleMania. Was fortunate enough to go to the Rumble with Liberty last year in Indianapolis. It's the best. The just nonstop energy makes it such a fun event, and unpredictability of it is also what makes it fun. Although I did get it right last year. I had Jey Uso winning. I did not get the female Rumble winner correct, but I'm going to double down. I have Bianca Belair returning to win the Women's Rumble so that she can get a little program with Jade Cargill going into WrestleMania. And on the men's side, Berm, boy, it's just got to be Braun Breaker. I don't see any other way around it, especially when you've got the Vision out there, all of them in the match with him, clearing the way for him to win and get a rematch with CM Punk. I don't want Braun Breaker to win. I would like to see Bianca win. It would be the person who most deserves it. If I'm picking with my heart, I'd like LA Knight to return. And get his revenge on the Vision and some revenge against CM Punk. I think that would be a great story. He's got a long. It's been a long time coming for him. It's been close, and they've not pulled the trigger. So I know that you have the actual answers, though.
Who do you think will be like the biggest surprise entrant to the men's side of the Royal Rumble? I pulled up here on sports.
Who you got?
/wrestling. It lists me all the guys that are participating and the women participating, and it says 13 men's spots remain, 14 women's spots remain. I don't know who Dragon Lee is, but I like that name, and I'm going to root for him to win.
He's a Ward family favorite. He gave Liberty an armband after SmackDown a couple of years ago. So that's got some Dragon Lee memorabilia in the house. Don't think he'll win the Rumble, but he is fun.
Well, I don't, as I said, I haven't had the wrestling on the telly in a while, since I haven't been at your house on a Monday night in a couple months. But I think you always have to go with Roman Reigns to win and Rhea Ripley to win. Of course, Rhea and Roman, the R and R.
A lot of R's there.
Because they're in Riyadh, right? Is that where they're doing that?
Yeah. So it's a lot of we know alliteration is huge here.
Yeah. And Saudis love alliteration. Everyone knows it.
I know you're definitely fired up for your guy Sami Zayn against Drew McIntyre for the
oh god,
for the championship. Biggest surprise, I do think that Chris Jericho will return to WWE on Saturday at 2:00.
I hope he breaks the walls down.
That would be so amazing. We just got.
You want to just do a live watch party of the Rumble is it on Peacock or is it on Netflix or is it on ESPN now? They keep changing the.
It is on.
Where do people watch this?
It is on ESPN. They're putting it in a lot of theaters around the country this weekend as well. If you want to do that instead of paying ESPN, which I support that endeavor fully.
Do people get all dressed up like, remember in the old days when like the Phantom Menace got released and everyone dressed like Darth Vader or whatever? Do people get dressed up as their favorite wrestler?
It's professional wrestling, Berm. Of course you dress up. That's the whole point.
If you were to dress up as a current WWE superstar, let's say Liberty can convince you to really go all out for Halloween this year. Okay. You have to take into full consideration your own physical appearance and build and everything. Which wrestler would you feel like you could pull off the look of best? Well,
I mean, my physique is still not professional wrestling caliber.
I think you could look like a really small Brock Lesnar if you really tried.
Dude, when I saw Brock
Lesnar,
I'm not kidding. And we all, Allie, Liberty, and I all said the same thing when we went to WrestlePalooza and Brock Lesnar came out for the Cena match. I have never seen anyone as intimidating in person as Brock Lesnar. And I've been covering college football for 20 years. He's an actual alien. And I don't know how television does not do Brock Lesnar justice. He is a scary person.
You could call yourself little Lesnar.
I mean, if you're looking at how I look and physique and the color of my hair and the beard possibility, I'm afraid that the only person I could pull off is your guy,
Sami
Zayn. It's me, Sami Zayn.
Well, that's the end of this show, folks. Been a really good time. Sorry for the folks over at the Waterworks. This is just what happens at the end of the week. The work week is over.
It's also the second time in 3 weeks that we've talked about Chris Jericho at the end of the show. So more of that.
Hey, Chris, if you're listening and you want to get on a Freaky Friday, give us a call.
Well, we'll talk about Fozzy and your cruise and everything else. I love you, Chris Jericho. You're my favorite. And I hope to see you on Saturday. And I hope to see all of you back if you made it this far into the beat. God bless you. And we will see you on Monday. Tentatively a Born Blitz. We've got several questions about what mat drills actually entail. So I'm going to go to the expert and have Zach break the walls down for mat drills as well. So I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Enjoy the Rumble or whatever else you would want to do that wouldn't be nearly as fun.
Pro Bowl games?
Are
those this weekend?
I don't know. Probably.
I'm so mad at the NFL for taking away the Pro Bowl from us the way that it used to be.
For my team and me.
It's so sad for my team.
He's Birm. I am Austin. Thanks again for joining us on The Beat presented by the Waterworks. We'll see you Monday.